Hello everyone, during this video we are going to present the defense to our research project entitled A Mixed Comparative Exploratory Action Research focused on the application of a methodology based on cultural capital within the classes of the EFL program of a public university in Colombia. This is going to be held by Maria Isabel Avila Santos, Ana Sofía Vega Manosalva, and who is speaking, Kevin Kendry Torres Alvarez.
This presentation is going to follow the next order. First, we're going to define the two main concepts of a research project. Then we're gonna mention the research questions and the research objectives. And after this, we're gonna explain a little bit about the theoretical framework and the review. This will be followed by the methodology, where we will explain the approach and the designs that will set the course of this investigation. And we're going to talk about the sample and the sampling and the instruments. And finally, we will briefly show you the chronogram that we will follow to collect the data. For a better understanding of a research project, it is important to know the difference between culture and cultural capital. While culture is defined as a social heredity transmitted from one generation to another involving the individual's collection of experiences, that is, belief, manners, thoughts, etc., cultural capital is conceived as a way of teaching English as a foreign language with everything related to cultural goods, such as painting, music, machines, etc.
For this research project, we established this research question. How does cultural capital improve the language proficiency of first to sixth semester EFL program students at the University of Pamplona? The specific questions are, according to the students, it is important to know cultural capital aspects in order to improve language proficiency. How is cultural capital presented in the classroom? Which are the differences between students who have received a cultural capital and those who have not?
The research objectives established to our research project are divided in two parts. Firstly, the general objective followed by three specific objectives. The first one is to improve the language proficiency of first to sixth semester EFL program students at the University of Pamplona by implementing a teaching methodology based on cultural capital. Later, we have the specific objective to provide material about general aspects of the Anglo-Saxon culture to EFL program students to motivate a deeper immersion into the Anglo-Saxon culture by the EFL program students and to compare the language proficiency between EFL program students who have received cultural capital and those who have not. To talk about the theoretical framework, it is important to highlight that we divided it into three variables. The first one is the important relation between culture and foreign language. Within these previous studies, both terms, culture and language, are presented as a fundamental part of each other, especially when talking about or when learning a new language is where the researchers' opinion converge by saying that a student must be taught with cultural competence in order to learn the foreign language properly.
The second category, the second variable, is called how culture affects a student's language proficiency when used to teach a foreign language. To describe this variable, we found several research papers that argue that culture cannot be separated from language. However, they all agree that most of these foreign language learning programs are more concerned with teaching the language rather than with culture. In brief, they all concur that foreign language learning not only means learning the language, but also learning its cultural background for having a language proficiency. But it is important to implement techniques with cultural contents and awareness of the target language. Furthermore, the teaching of culture turns out to be a vital component of language learning and teaching, because as it has much to offer to the development of communicative competence as well as other skills in the instruction of any language, especially in their interaction with native language speakers. Their performance will be better.
The last category or variable is called teacher's role when teaching the culture of the target language. Here we were able to find several authors who stated that teachers in different classrooms in different parts of the world still ignore the importance of teaching culture as part of a language. This happens sometimes due to the teacher's lack of familiarity concerning the culture, and this lack of cultural familiarity might originate from many reasons. One of them may be the fact that they they have not had the opportunity to travel to other countries where English is spoken and is considered the first language. Therefore, have not entirely immersed themselves in the culture of the target language. Additionally, these papers highlight that teachers act as mediators between cultures, which involves the responsibility to help learners to understand other people and their cultures. That's why teachers should benefit students by introducing culture with specific topics on politics, economics, and geography to their respective classrooms and situation using a cultural capital.
Well, to the literature review, um, it is important to highlight that we also divided in the same previously mentioned variables. Um, Here are the studies used for the first one. At first sight, in this category, it was evident that how all papers present or illustrate both terms um, with an unbreakable bond, and in some cases as something intrinsic and indispensable that, as I said before, English teacher should have to take into account within their classes.
With the second variable, it was possible to observe that although previous investigations were carried out with different design, they all conclude that the implementation of culture in EFL students program affects their cultural proficiency positively. Likewise, the significant breadth in their critical thinking help them to have more cultural awareness in the target language. Besides, the value of other types of research can also provide us interesting information on the subject in question.
Well, bear in mind that this research project is focused on creating a teaching methodology based on mainly on cultural capital. It was important for us to consider the teacher's perspectives and points of view regarding the teaching of culture within a classroom. In the slides is the list of the investigation used for this category. What we were able to analyze from this paper is that teachers change their thoughts dramatically during these processes, since now they consider that using culture to support their teaching processes can be beneficial for themselves as well as for their students instead of their previous thoughts, where they consider that having an intercultural oriented perspective in classes actually diverts them from achieving the required linguistic objectives. For the methodology, this research project will follow a mixed research approach, which is a systematic integration of quantitative and qualitative methods in a single student for obtaining a fuller picture and a deeper understanding of a phenomenon. In this case, a mixed approach will allow us as researchers to continually analyze the different angles and perspectives of how cultural capital influences the language proficiency of EFL students at University of Pamplona. Therefore, in order to answer all the research questions and fulfill the objectives, This inquiry will take on different method designs. The first one is the comparative experimental design, since this research seeks to compare the English language proficiency of EFL students at University of Pamplona when they are provided with a methodology based on cultural capital. Furthermore, as it was almost impossible to find research where cultural capital acts as a method for teaching a foreign language, this research project will also use an exploratory research design, which is usually carried out when the problem is not well defined yet. And finally, given that this research is carried out at the University of Pamplona, that is an educational setting, an action research design will set the course for this investigation.
Well, initially, to talk about the sampling criteria, it is important to say that the premise that rule this part of the research said that a select number of components could genuinely represent the study population by providing a true reflection of it with high degree of probability. To implement this premise, we choose the stratified purposive sampling because first it allowed to divide the population into groups, in this specific case into their semesters, and second because it gave us the option to select possible participants that will present full commitment to the research. And later, uh, after the division, we select a small group of students that will study through the method and instrument that will be that are going to be explained later on. This study will be implemented, as we said before, at the University of Pamplona at the Bachelor of Arts in Foreign Languages with the students from first to sixth semester. Um, it is because this criteria is established because it is during this period of time where students reach or are part in the range of the A1 to B2 level according to the Common European Framework.
Keeping in mind that our project is a mixed comparative experimental action research, we will use six instruments that will ease the collection quantitatively and qualitatively of the data required. For the quantitative data, both questionnaire and surveys will be used. The questionnaire will allow us to have a large collection of responses from the participants on the subject that will be carried out. The surveys will permit precise information from the participants about the research project, and having in this way a better description, exploration, and explanation of the study. On the other hand, for the qualitative data, the researchers will use a selection of instruments as first, participant observation. This instrument will be useful at the moment of knowing the student's behavior in the EFL classroom. Second, focus group interview. Well, this tool allow us to acquire useful information about a specific topic from the participants by observing them and interacting. Third, recording on electronic devices. To implement this instrument, the researchers must first request the consent of the participants. This will allow us to be sure of the information provided by the participants before declaring the final results. Finally, it will be necessary to use an instrument that provides both qualitative and quantitative data. In this way, an unstructured interview will be carried out with the participants. Researchers will categorize their question so that participants' responses will be coded and qualified. On the other hand, to obtain qualitative information, it will be necessary to collect purely verbal information rich in description and arguments that will follow a logical sequence.
Finally, this is our chronogram of activities that will be carried out next semester to collect the data needed.
Well, we're going to start with the creation of the data collection instrument to organize or have in mind if the instruction for the correct use to reduce any error. Secondly, the first and second piloting to analyze if the selected instruments are sufficiently applicable to our research project. Later, to validate the instrument to establish if the final instrument, to establish the final instrument that we are going to implement or use, and the permission and participant letter submission, which will give us the permission or authorization that are going to be needed.
Then we have the class observations and participant observations. There are two of them. The first one is to observe the methodology used by the English teachers and the students' participation during the normal classes. And the second one is to observe if there are any changes within this the type of methodology and the participation of the students. Then we have the application of a placement test to the participants. This is to identify the students' English level according to a common European framework of reference.
As I said before, unstructured interviews with recording devices will be used to involve the students in the research project, giving them the opportunity to comment on any suggestion that they have on the topic to follow. Then a class session to implement the cultural capital in order to develop the students' skills. Also questionnaire to gather quantitative information regarding the students' learning process towards the new methodology implemented. And the focus group discussion is to gather qualitative information regarding the students' learning process.
The last ones instruments that we'll be using next semester are a focus group interview that is to observe if the cultural capital content is working within the learning process of the students, but it allow us to have a close interaction with the participants. And finally, a survey that will help us to quantify the students' perceptions of the cultural capital content used. This was our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much. These are the references. Thank you.